Breaking news.
From Ohio Valley to the mists of the Appalachian Plateau, this is Midnight in the Southland with your host, Gus Guthrie. After she washed off his blood in the nearby creek, Mary spent the rest of the day hiding in the barn loft.
The white zone is for immediate...
Double door. In his disappointment, the child takes minutes, an accounting of the hours transpiring after the appearance of the big hole in lavish bygone.
25 runs north to south through a lot of old towns: Livingston, Landon, Stafford.
The building was a converted brick row home sandwiched.
As I was driving, came upon this town I didn't recognize.
That whole time.
Before. Maybe like I'd lived there my whole life.
Touch. Abyss.
They probably...
Earlier this summer, word spread around our town that the magic show's doors were open.
Who doesn't love a book trailer? Am I right? You're muted. The man of the hour is muted. Can you believe this? Jesus Christ.
This guy, man, I swear.
So I have to spill a little bit of tea, but
We are live, Rob.
good. I got to see the trailer a little bit before. I mean, obviously people got to see it before you showed it to other folks. And I was really, I'm not surprised because your work is always really good. I as soon as you said, "Hey, take a look at this," I was like, this is going to be awesome. But you don't expect like a book trailer to hit, quite that hard. And yours does. And I've seen a lot of book trailers, a lot of really good book trailers, but I would say yours is definitely near the top of those like great ones. You know what I mean?
I appreciate you saying that because I don't know what the hell I'm doing
Good.
most of the time. And, it's just one of those things where I just started playing around in Adobe Premiere knowing that I needed to come up with something.
Yeah.
So,
I love it. It was great. And the feedback from others that I saw online was really great too. But I'm jumping the shark here. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Bram Stoker Award-winning author Robert P. Ottone, and aka Daddy Scary. And with me tonight is the man of the hour. Today is the launch of his collection called Black and Infinite. Hold it up for everybody. There it is. What a beautiful hardcover that is, too. That's great.
Thank you.
Really nice looking. The Bard of the Abyss himself, Todd Keisling. There he is. So, and tonight we're going to, Todd's going to read, from the collection, if you guys start acting right. And, we're just going to talk a little bit about writing. We're going to talk about the collection, talk about, a bunch of different things. But if you have questions, by all means, put them in the chat. We have one question that came from Twitter that I'll get to later. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of start off with, I always steal my collection naming conventions from Langan. Like literally, I always
Fucking Langan.
The specter of Der Fischer looms over both of us. But I always steal my naming conventions from him. And I'm just curious, when you name a collection, all of your titles are always so, great. Scanlines always jumps to mind. Devil's Creek is obviously evocative. And I know where Cold Black and Infinite comes from, but like when you think of your naming conventions for your, a short collection or your short stories in general, where does that come from for you?
My titles?
Mm-hmm.
They come from any number of places. I mean, my writing process involves having a title, even if it's just a working title. Um, sometimes the title is the first thing I have. I've got like a file on my phone of just titles.
Hmm.
And sometimes I'll have a story that fits. Sometimes title comes up during the planning stages, the brainstorming stages. There were actually, I'm trying to find the post now. You'd think I would have it if I were more prepared, but here it is. So it was a Patreon post, and I had a bunch of different title ideas, and I'm highlighting these comments as I go, folks. And I apologize if I don't name you specifically, but thank you everybody for the well wishes and the happy launch comments and whatnot. I appreciate it very much. So anyway, title wise, so it was originally going to be called, there were nine other title possibilities.
Oh, wow.
And I also started to follow Langan at first. So it was going to be, at one point, it was The Smile Factory and Other Failures.
That's really good. I like that.
Midnight in the Southland and Other Escapes.
That one's cool.
We've All Gone to the Magic Show and Other Phantasms.
I like that one too.
Cold Dark Nothings.
Okay.
I almost went with that, actually.
Really?
Yeah. This one's pretty dark. Mouths Taped Shut.
Yeah. I'm gonna steal that one from you.
There were 9 other titles. Could very well be another title. Yes,
Yeah,
thank you, Red. Red Legault also has a book coming out this week on Friday, I believe. So
yes.
check that out. Brad, hello.
Oh, Brad Proctor's here. Hello.
Yeah, pressure's on now.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
Another title was, and I may actually use this in the future, so nobody can claim it. I Built These Worlds to Burn Stories.
Oh, that's cool. I like that one. It's very cosmic.
Another one that was inspired by a Nine Inch Nails song, A Perfect Ring of Scars Stories, from the song Ruiner. A Rolling Stones inspired one, Until My Darkness Goes, which may end up being the title of a novella/novel in the future.
That's a cool title.
And last but not least, from Florence and the Machine, No Light, No Light.
Not The Dog Days Are Over?
No, not The Dog Days Are Over.
That's what my autobiography is going to be called.
I knew it.
Will There Ever Be a Rainbow by Robert P. Ottone. That's what Mr. Burns' biography is.
So from Cold Dark Nothings, I realized, it's very much like the song Branches and Bones by Nine Inch Nails. There's a line, cold and black and infinite with nothing left to lose.
Mm.
So that's where the title comes from. I can't play that song because I don't want to get, a copyright strike.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, it went through many iterations before before we landed on Cold, Black, and Infinite.
That's cool. Now, did that happen with your other collections as well? Like, were there a lot of titles that were thrown around for those as well, or what? No, so those were like, this is what this one is.
Ugly Little Things. I had that title before it was a collection. It was originally the name of a story. That later became The Harbinger, and I did that just so I could differentiate them.
That's interesting. So now I'm jumping around a little bit because I had this question teed up towards the end, but since we're talking about the title, I feel like it's only natural to talk about the cover, which you designed also, yes, which I got to see again ahead of other people, and I had to zoom in and find all the creepiness, which was a lot of fun. Now, the inspiration for this cover. Do you want to like give any kind of hints as to where that might have stemmed from? Because I remember you were playing with the cover quite a bit, and there was like a little bit more that you wanted, that you at first were going to add in, and then you took it out, which I think is, personally, I like how the cover looks. But why don't you talk a little bit about that?
So if you guys were following along my Twitter thread today, all 5 hours of it, shoot me. I talked a little bit about where the cover came from, and it ties in with one of the news stories in the collection, a prose poem called "We've All Gone to Crooked Town," which in itself is a prequel to "We've All Gone to the Magic Show," which closes out the collection. And Laurel actually has a question about that, and we'll get to that in a second. Thank you, Laurel. I had the idea for the cover as soon as I finished the poem. I knew I wanted it to be of the child and the well and the stranger who comes to town. The story is about, among other things, creativity, being dissatisfied with your reality and trying to change it. So the kid basically is given this coin. He makes a wish and drops it in the well, and the town begins to transform around him. Hey, Cat. So I don't have it in front of me. I don't even know where it is actually, but I had a sketch that I made of like a full, drew out a grid for the cover, and it was basically just a full spread vision of a cliff face.
Mm-hmm.
And originally, like, it had the figures where they are, and originally I had this idea of like this grotesque mountain of creatures kind of crawling up themselves along the cliff face to get to them.
I remember that. Yeah.
And I originally wanted Francois Valancourt to do the cover, but it was scheduling and everything. We were running out of time to get the arcs ready. So, hey, Krista. So I basically said to Kevin Lucia, the editor at Cemetery Dance,
Mm-hmm.
I said, look, let me take a stab at this, just so we can have something. It doesn't have to be final. And so, yeah, I cranked it out in a night. And I stopped for the evening because I couldn't figure out how I wanted to do the figures.
Right.
Coming up the cliff face, and that was a bit beyond my skill level, and like I would have had to have drawn them, and I don't really do that anymore, so I'm very rusty. And yeah, I slept on it. I came back to it. I showed it to Erica and got her opinion on should I include the figures or not, because I was kind of digging it as it was, and she agreed it didn't need the figures, and that's where it comes from.
Yeah.
And I liked it because it really put me in mind of covers that like Bram's books have, and the covers that Word Horde is putting out.
Yeah.
I love what they're doing with their their presentation and everything. Shout out to Ross. And I wanted it to kind of have the same vibe. I wanted it to be mysterious. I wanted it to be not in your face, but kind of pulled back, and kind of like as an invitation to get the reader to pick it up, look at it closely, and from there, it's just a matter of them opening the book. Which, I mean, with a cover like that, how could they not?
Of course. I'm glad that you went with the not having the creatures going up the side, because I think it's spot on perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you mentioned working with Kevin. Talk a little about working with Kevin Lucia. I've only met him a few times, and he's always been super sweet and nice to me. But he may hate you. I don't know.
Ah, he's okay. No, I'm Kevin and I have known each other for a long time. I only met him in person a few years ago, but we've known each other online for 10 years, something like that. No, he's a pretty good friend, and that working relationship came about when Silver Shamrock imploded over the course of 12 hours. And we were both at AuthorCon when that happened. He approached me about taking on Devil's Creek with Cemetery Dance because he had just become their paperback and ebooks editor.
Yep.
And if I recall correctly, we had actually my former agent had actually pitched the collection to him before Devil's Creek became a thing. Like they had an open call for that line. We pitched the collection, and we got the offer for Devil's Creek, and then we got the offer for Cold Black and Infinite. So it basically became a 2-book deal.
Awesome. Nice. And he's a sweet dude, like I said.
Yeah, and he's an author himself. He's got the Clifton Heights stories. Most recently, Joey Leonard's last horror movie marathon.
Yep.
Through Bleeding Edge. Definitely check that one out. But yeah, he's a machine, man. Like he's constantly writing, and I'm envious of that work ethic. Thanks, William.
And
thanks for coming.
Cemetery Dance putting out a lot of really cool, exciting stuff too. So
yeah,
I figured I would go to Mr. Jonathan Lee's question from the Twitter.
Oh no,
or whatever we're calling it. How does one balance being so evil and yet so prolific?
You know, I appreciate the votes of confidence there.
You are very prolific, to be fair. Like
I don't really consider myself prolific. Like I'm not Mallerman prolific. I'm not, cranking out 10 novels before breakfast. Once upon a time when I was younger, right out of college, I was prolific. I was writing constantly. That's obviously slowed down first, with the day job, and now with mental health issues and kind of understanding my own limitations. Like I give myself a certain amount of time a day, and then I got to step away and recharge.
Yeah.
Because if I push myself and go over that span of time, I tend to feel like shit the next day. So, when I'm not designing books, which is what I do for a living now, I'm brainstorming. Even if I'm not writing, I'm still, any writer here watching knows you're still writing in your head.
Yeah.
So that's a machine that never gets shut off, I don't think, except when you're sleeping. Maybe not even then.
No, because our dreams are constantly
But
things.
to answer Jonathan's question, why am I so evil? Evil to some.
Ooh. I want to go back. I want to go back to Laurel's question. If you could put that up on the screen.
Oh, sure.
Because then I'm going to go into something else. But Laurel's question: any plans to expand the last story, the Magic Show one?
It's definitely not out of the question. I have this idea to kind of have like these mini trilogies of stories where they don't get like their own releases per se, but they all kind of follow a bigger arc. Like I could see another story following Magic Show, but it'll come up naturally. It's not something I've planned on. Same goes for the story The Gods of Our Fathers. There's actually another story that just came out, as a matter of fact. I don't know if he's watching, but Kevin Kangas just published October Screams, a Halloween anthology. And it contains a new story of mine called The Puppeteer of Samhain. and that actually serves as a kind of like a pseudo sequel to the Gods of Our Fathers. Not directly, but it references some of those events. And I actually have an idea for a story that picks up from there and kind of follows its logical progression. That I started several years ago and just couldn't find the right footing with it. So it's kind of in my folder of in progress stuff. That's tentatively titled The Sabbath Hunt.
It's funny how this stuff works, right? Like you'll write one short story and then every once in a while a kernel of that story remains with you and you just want to play with it, over and over, or at least until it's run its course for you.
Yeah, like it's something that I've started doing with Devil's Creek. Like I told the story of Norma Lifthauser, the mother of the frontman of the band The Yellow Kings, which their stories in the final reconciliation. But she's mentioned in Devil's Creek as being a member of the psych ward at the local hospital. So my story, Holes in the Fabric, which is in this collection, bridges those two stories, and it tells her story of how she ended up there. And I like that. I like taking these little throwaway mentions of non-important characters and then giving them kind of the stage front and center and developing them further. It doesn't have to be in the scope of a novel. It can be its own story.
Yeah.
And I really like doing that. I will probably do that with some other characters from Devil's Creek somewhere down the line when, the story fits.
Like with the Vile thing for me, like specifically, there was some people have given me like feedback that they want more of a certain character here or there that I never thought of before. So has there ever been anything that like a reader has said to you like, oh, I picked up on this little note about this one character or something like that, and you've been like, that's interesting, and then you kind of explore it from there?
Yeah, actually, the first one that comes to mind is, I guess I can talk about this because nothing ever came of it, but a couple of summers ago, I was working closely actually with a production company on a treatment for what the first season of Devil's Creek would look like if it were a series. And thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Baphomet Books. And the writer that they had attached to the project, we were they kept me involved because they wanted to maintain the accuracy and also the tone. They needed that. They wanted it to be authentic to the region. And he said something to me about the final showdown in Devil's Creek that I wish I'd thought of, because it was brilliant. And this is spoiler territory, folks. So like turn your volume down for like, a couple of minutes if you want. So you've been warned.
I'll give you a thumbs up when it's time that you can turn it back up.
3, 2, 1, spoilers. It's in the final confrontation between Jacob Masters and Jack, the protagonist. And Jack asks his father, "Did you ever really love me?" And Jacob says no in the book. Well, this guy, I think his name was Caleb, I forget exactly, but like he says, I actually would change that to say that, yeah, he did love his children. And that just quantifies his sacrifice all the more. And that blew my mind. That had never occurred to me. I feel stupid for not occurring to me. And that makes me want to go back and kind of write a a prequel story of sorts about the church in its early days, and kind of walk through that transformation of Jacob, of when he gets to be the person we meet at the beginning of Devil's Creek.
Okay.
Just to kind of, fix my own error, I guess.
Well, it's not really your error. It's just how you were thinking didn't lead you down that experiment. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, that's just who his character was to me at the time.
Yeah, and there's nothing, nothing really too crazy that you would need to change it or anything. It could be interesting, but let's do a couple more questions, then maybe we'll go for you to read, yeah?
Sure.
Okay. Talking, and again, maybe this goes, Kevin might come into play again here, Kevin Lucia, but when you're constructing a collection, how much guidance are you providing with the order of the stories, or is it more along the lines of, you're offering guidance or you're putting them in order yourself? Like, which one is it? And is there, in your mind, like a special kind of alchemy that goes into constructing a collection, that you want to hit certain notes a certain way, and you want to put a palate cleanser story here or there, whatever, that kind of thing?
So I put the collection in the order that it's in. And I approached it as one would a greatest hits album. You've got your bangers, you've got your more quiet notes, and you kind of want to mix the new material in with the old material to kind of freshen it up and sprinkle it in.
Yep.
So I organized it in that order with that in mind, but then I realized there is kind of like thematic links to all of these stories, like so that's why I broke it up into 3 parts: cold, black, and infinite. The first grouping of stories is, some of them are kind of holiday themed in the colder months. Some, cold is literal and figurative.
Right.
The same goes for, when we move into to black, the stories are darker. They're a little bit more in your face. They're a little bit gorier. And then we get to the infinite, which is, more cosmic, more cerebral, more make you question your place in the world and how insignificant it is, that sort of thing. And in hindsight, it was kind of weird that it worked out that way, because in hindsight, it also kind of reminds me of the course of a night. It gets dark, it gets cold, then it's full dark, it's black, and then you've got the infinite, or the sea of stars above. There are several different ways you can look at it, and I love the dynamic nature of it in that respect.
That's awesome. I love that. I'm thinking of when you just said the infinite too. It's like the you could also interpret it as like the infinite possibility of what comes next.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, and also to bookend that, I also looked at this as kind of an end of another era of my career. Like Ugly Little Things kind of capped off the early days for me, and then this is everything that I've done since then. So now we're kind of like, I feel like my career's kind of gone, slowly up and up, and this kind of, I don't know, bookends this phase. So the next one, what's that going to look like? How long is it going to take? I don't know. We'll see.
How long was it between Ugly Little Things and this one?
Ugly Little Things came out.
Is it 2019?
It's 2017.
Oh.
Yeah, that came out in 2017. So 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I thought it was sooner than that. I thought it was more recent than that. That's wild. Speak of Mallerman, there he is.
Hey.
Speak of
oh man, Mallerman's here, and I don't even have a can of Truly with me. Damn
Oh
it.
God, is he a truly guy?
He's a truly guy. You didn't hear this story?
No, no, Jesus, come on, man. um, let's do a little reading, yeah, and then we'll come back for some more questions. And as always, like if you have questions in the chat at all, by all means, put them in there, and we'll get to them once Todd's done reading. And I have a few more questions as well.
So, can I make this just me? Okay, sorry, Rob. So I'm going to read from the first story in the collection. It's called Midnight in the Southland. This seems to be the unanimous favorite of the bunch among early readers and reviewers. This is my ode to AM radio, the Twilight Zone, Art Bell, Coast to Coast AM, and also, in fact, I dedicated it to Art Bell and my friend Nikki Nelson Hicks. So, this is the first mention of the Southland, and as a thing to explain all the weird shit that happens from tip of Ohio all the way down to Florida, I guess. From the grim Ohio Valley to the midst of the Appalachian Plateau, this is Midnight in the Southland with your host, Gus Guthrie. Now, here's Gus. That's how Midnight in the Southland always started. Back in the 90s and early aughts, if you were anywhere in Ohio, Kentucky, or either of the Virginias, you probably heard old Gus. Ghosts, demons, aliens, government conspiracies, you name it. Gus talked about it. He played it straight, took every caller seriously, treated them with respect, and over the years, he built a reputation for being the Fox Mulder of radio. Gus wanted to believe, and the odds were good he'd believe you, too. I grew up listening to him, usually on those late nights while camping with my dad. My old man would be conked out in his sleeping bag, and I'd still be awake, listening to the whispering trees, crackling fire, and the static-tinged yarns spun by guests on Gus's show. We're all lonely travelers, he used to say, wandering empty roads under a weight of cosmic indifference. I didn't understand what he meant back then. I just knew I wanted to be a lonely traveler, a mysterious caller in the night, someone who saw or heard or felt something. That never happened. Not while I was a kid, and not while Gus was still alive and on the air. He died sometime in 2002, just after I'd started college. The Lexington Herald gave him front page real estate. Remembering Gus Guthrie, the headline read. And the online forums were filled with everyone's favorite stories from his tenure at the microphone. They all expressed a similar feeling, one I had often felt while growing up, about Gus being a kind of beacon in the dark forest of the weird. What brings you out tonight, lonely traveler? Another Gus Guthrie slogan, one that adorned t-shirts for a time after the show achieved cult status. I still have mine. A badge of honor, maybe, or perhaps a token of membership. An odd question to the average person, but to those in the know, an invitation to share something unconventional. Most Southland fans were either truck drivers or conspiracy nuts, veterans of the Southland space. But sometimes you'd hear from the first-timers, the uninitiated, the ones who took a wrong turn or talked to the wrong person. Tales of towns with labyrinthian roads, pallid and smiling people, ghost hitchhikers, spectral locomotives, eerie blue lights in the sky, and awful chants coming from within the earth. The sort of stories they couldn't tell their friends or family, the sort that would earn them a puzzled, if not cautious, reaction. But they could tell their stories straight on Gus's show. No judgment. Those stories were the best because they were real. real wonder, real mystery, real fear. Confessions of the confusing and unexplained, testament to the region's bizarre effect on the mind, the people, and space itself. The Southland's a different place, Gus said once, with secret towns and secret highways, filled with secret people, wearing secret smiles. While growing up, I always thought he was talking in metaphors. Years later, long after college, I discovered I was wrong. Night drives were something I started doing in school after a bad breakup, late at night when I couldn't get away from my thoughts with those incessant what-ifs infecting my mind like cancer. I took to the roads around campus and pretended to be someone else. I fantasized about leaving town, starting over, walking away from my life as if that would somehow magically cure the ache in my heart. And while I never did leave, the act of driving endlessly in the dark calmed me somehow, helped me find a kind of temporary solace so I could sleep. Gus's show was a soothing balm on those nights, and I often zoned out to the stories of strangers and their paranormal encounters, usually finding myself on some side street or country road outside Lexington. I didn't mind, though, because I wasn't alone in the Southland. Somewhere out there, Gus was keeping watch over me, over all of us lonely travelers stumbling about in the darkness of our hearts. I started driving at night about 2 months after Gus died. I'd worked my way through the grief of a failed relationship and had toyed with the idea of writing an email to Gus. Just a short note to say thanks for being there, for guiding another lonely traveler through the night. The classes got in the way. Life got in the way. And then Gus was gone, and I had to move on just like everyone else. So I did. I graduated, got a job, fell in love, and got married. I forgot about Midnight in the Southland for a while because that was a part of my old life, and I'd begun a new chapter with a new me. That lasted for about 20 years until the marriage fell apart, and I found myself back at square one, feeling like I did in college, the way I'd felt my whole life. Stripped of my identity, lost in between the cracks of reality, alone. Just me and the night once more. A lonely traveler after all. That feeling is how I came to go for one more night drive. That and a paring knife. I'd had a late dinner, and afterward I accidentally sliced open my thumb while doing the dishes. Boxes littered my apartment, still filled with the remnants of a broken life, and I didn't have the energy to go sifting through them for a Band-Aid. Instead, I decided to go out for a drive, grab a pack of bandages from the nearest gas station. Maybe I'd clear my head in the process. Maybe I needed that more than the bandages. I stepped out into the night and took a breath. The warm night air smelled of fresh cut grass and honeysuckle, and I thought of lying in a dark tent, listening to Gus while my old man sawed logs. What brings you out tonight, lonely traveler? A need for bandages, a need for escape, something to ease the numbness inside. A solitary yearning for something more, something I can't define. To seek and experience something more than myself, to find my place in the Southland, maybe. I climbed into my car, started the engine, lowered the windows, and cranked the radio. My thumb had stopped bleeding, so I decided to skip the gas station. Instead, I'd go for a drive and get lost for a while. Maybe I'd find myself again, or figure out the me I'm supposed to be. Next caller, you're on the air. Hi, Gus. First-time caller, long-time listener. Love your show. Thank you, lonely traveler. What brings you out tonight? And if you want to find out what happens next, you can order the book, Cold, Black, and Infinite, from your favorite bookstore or Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold.
Wherever fine books are sold.
Wherever fine, evil, occult books are sold.
Ooh. You're my Art Bell guy. I don't know if you remember, I messaged you a couple weeks ago. I was like, hey, where can I listen to old Art Bell days? I was working on something about Art Bell. And I just remembered, like, you were one of the only people I know who even knew who he was. So that's why I went to you for that. But I think it's interesting, like, you do a good job of sort of writing that loneliness of being on the road late at night. Like, I don't know, like, I used to travel a lot with my dad when I was a kid. And, like, we'd be driving late at night and we'd be listening to the radio and stuff. And I love that. I miss that. You know what I mean? I miss those days of radio.
So the thing is that I didn't discover, Art Bell until the early 2000s. Like not like the guy in the story. Like Art Bell had been on the air for close to a decade at that point.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't discover him until Tool's album Lateralis, which the last song or the last track has a clip, one of the more famous clips from Art's show. And that led me down the rabbit hole of archives of his show and everything. And, like some of that story is autobiographical. I went through a bad breakup in college. I went out late at night a lot of times to just drive around and get out of my space for a while. So, I was a huge X-Files fan when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Just the speculative nature of it all, Twilight Zone, X-Files.
Yeah.
And Art's, I guess he never talked down to the people calling in. He always took them at face value. He never, called them cranks or anything like that. Like they called in to tell him a story and he listened and would, ask questions as someone who was interested in what they were saying, not to belittle them for what they believed.
Mm-hmm.
And I always appreciated that about him.
I feel like there's a ton of supernatural, like, podcasts and stuff like that nowadays, but, like, almost none of them do that. None of them ever, just listen and then ask questions and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they usually are very, oh, here's a story, and then later on they'll kind of talk down a little bit or whatever. But Jim Harold's Campfire reminds me a little bit of
Jim Harold's Campfire is another good one. That's a good, like, spiritual successor, I would say.
Big time. And he's a really sweet dude. So it's a nice thing to see. But I had a question on my list. I was thinking about it earlier today.
Real quick, shout out to Alan Owen. He's a former coworker that I worked with at the Smile Factory, and I'm glad you made it, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
What's the Smile Factory? What is that?
The Smile Factory is a story in Cold Black and Infinite that was released previously as a chapbook. I wrote it about the job I had at the time, the company. And
oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's kind of like what happens to you when you basically make a company your life, and they kind of feed off your misery for profit.
So like teaching.
Kind of like every job.
Yeah, cool. I always am a fan of collections that are kind of a smorgasbord of stories, and then a theme emerges later on, or like a theme just kind of naturally emerges, like you mentioned before, like the idea of a section of stories being cold, black, infinite, and you didn't naturally go into it trying to do that. So it's just interesting how that happens. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like that idea of like alchemy or whatever you want to say, where something just naturally emerges. I'm always like fascinated by that, because I was thinking about my collection. I was doing an interview earlier today, and I was like, I know, and the guy was like, yeah, it's this, dummy. Like the interviewer was like, this is your theme. And I was like, oh, okay, that works. So
wow, I've got coworkers left and right showing up.
Look at you.
Hi, Carrie. Fellow survivor of that other shit show.
Of the Smile Factory.
Hey, Dawn.
So I'm just curious about this, and this is just like a personal taste kind of question. And again, if anybody has questions, throw them in the chat. We'll get to them. That'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, please.
But I think about like, my favorite single author collections. I don't read a lot of anthologies these days. I did, a couple of years ago, I was buying anthologies. It's the same people over and over, and I'm just like, meh. So I buy a lot of single author collections though. And, I'm thinking of my favorite ones like Saphir and Other Betrayals and The Informers and Songs for the Unraveling of the World, stuff like that. What are some of the ones that you hold in high regard in that way?
Oh man, Night Shift by Stephen King, right off the top. That's at the top of the list. Night Shift, definitely. That's where I always recommend people who never have read Stephen King where they start. I feel like he's Stephen King. We all love him, but he's at his strongest when he's writing short form, in my opinion. Beyond that, Books of Blood by Clive Barker. That's a classic. Definitely changed how I approach language in my stories. General language, not like cursing or anything. I mean, just in general, like he could make the most vile things sound beautiful.
Yeah.
Secret of Ventriloquism by John Paget. And let's see. Every Woman Knows This by Laurel Hightower. That one's for free, Laurel. Thank you. Probably The Wide Carnivorous Sky by Langan. Don't tell him I said that, though.
I'm going to text him right now.
Oh, you're going to text him?
Yeah.
I'm going to email him after and be like, don't listen to Rob. He does not know what he's talking about.
Don't check your email, Mr.
Pretty much everything that Laird Barron has done, short form. His long, I've yet to read something by Laird that I disliked. But his collections, again, man, like Beautiful Thing That Awaits Us All. God, I'm blanking on the other two. Swift Chase was the most recent one. All right. If you want a quick way to my heart is to send me money with a bag of Grippos.
What's Grippos?
Grippos are a southern delicacy. It's a really inexpensive bag of chips, and they're coated in barbecue seasoning, and they're amazing.
They're just barbecue chips?
They're barbecue chips, but they're unlike any barbecue chips you've ever had, Mr. Long Island. We don't have frou-frou barbecue chips down in Kentucky, sir. No,
Kentucky.
We have Grippos.
Down here, we got ourselves a nice bag of Grippos.
Damn right.
I will eat Grippos, and I would love to try them.
So if you come to AuthorCon next year in Virginia,
please,
I guarantee you, I'll send Laurel money to get you a bag of Grippos. You too, Becky.
I'm a big question mark for AuthorCon. So I ran into this with my recent collection, but there are some stories that when maybe not like when a theme emerges or when a title, whatever, for whatever reason, maybe a story was in the collection before but did not make the cut when it got to the final round. Was there anything in this collection that you were just like, maybe like either last minute or maybe early on, you were just kind of like, this story is not quite, it just doesn't make the cut for me this time around?
I got a few.
Yeah.
There were a few that early on I just kind of left alone.
Were these
older stories,
okay.
old stories. They're stories that I want to revisit and basically rewrite from ground up. Because I think they one of them especially would fit very well in the Southland series.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had there's one called "So Delicious the Dreams of Man," which is it's unfinished essentially. It kind of ends abruptly because I was up against the wall of a word count,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not one of my favorites. So it kind of stays on the cutting room floor. Two older stories. One's called Toothache, which I wrote in college while I had an impacted wisdom tooth,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in a lot of pain. And I wrote a story about this guy who's snowed in his apartment, and he can't leave to get to go to a dentist. And while he's like examining the tooth in the mirror, the top of the tooth like pops off, and these little creatures crawl out of it and
Awesome.
proceed to consume him. Funny story about that is that was the first thing I ever submitted to Pseudopod, and they emailed to let me know that they would have accepted it if they hadn't accepted a story with the same title and premise a week before.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
What are the odds?
wow.
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
And I listened to that story later, and mine was better anyway. So,
Well, of course, Todd. Of course. So the stories that you're talking about had not been published anywhere.
Well, So Delicious the Dreams of Man has never been published anywhere before. Toothache was in the very first chapbook I ever published myself way back in college.
Oh, okay.
Along with another story that I want to revisit someday. It's called Dead Ohio Sky, after a Tool song.
Mm-hmm.
About this preteen kid whose parents basically like leave him to take care of his disabled younger brother, and while they're at this the town fair, and this kid meets a tarot reader, like a fortune teller,
Mm-hmm.
and they make a deal, and I don't want to tell you what happens, but you can probably figure it out. But
things go well,
that story was originally meant to be a prologue to a longer novel that I kind of had an idea for in college, and that eventually transformed into the early makings of Devil's Creek.
Oh, that's interesting. I love that. It's so weird how this stuff works.
Right? It's like bits and pieces of this story that you wrote that you didn't care for, or it's just too amateurish, but little seeds of the idea, you kind of nurture it and put it in fresh soil and it grows.
Yeah.
It's crazy how that works.
Jesus.
Now,
hey,
Candace.
Oh, hello. Hi, everybody. If you have questions for the Todd Father, feel free to put them in the chat. I didn't come up with that name. That's Mo Machadi's fault.
I know that's Mo's fault.
Who I'm publishing through Spooky House Press. Hey.
The Todd Father.
She's great. But there's no living with you now.
No, I'm insufferable from this point forward.
Now,
as if I wasn't before.
Yeah, now truly Erica is your long-suffering wife.
For those who aren't in the know, from the moment I met him, John Langan has referred to my wife Erica as my long-suffering wife.
Yeah.
Even in emails, he still says, "Give my regards to your long-suffering wife."
Oh, it's just too good. Now, I have a few questions. I have a couple questions left, really. But I'm just curious. Oh, you know what? Let's talk a little bit about Langan, because we both.
Yes.
We both.
Let's talk about Langan.
Yeah. My hero, one of my heroes. Talk about, how it felt getting him to write the foreword to the collection.
It was euphoric,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, and I talk shit about John all the time, but the truth is that I love him dearly, and he's the closest thing I would say I have to a mentor. And not, I mean, that's not official. Like, he hasn't said I will mentor you. I mean, just his writing, the way he tells stories, the way he presents himself, in public, and he can talk shit like the best of them, but at his core, uh he is a very kind-hearted person, and he's vastly intelligent. Like, we need to talk about Langan. That's going to be the name of my memoir.
Let's do a podcast.
Even my memoir is about John.
That's the move. Is we do a podcast talking about Langan.
We just talk about Langan, but we never have him on the show.
No. Are you kidding?
We'll have Cisco on, and we'll have Laird on,
and we'll have
Langan.
Yeah, everybody will talk shit about John. We'll get Bram on. We'll send him some Truly, and he'll get on. It'll be great.
So, like, the first time I met him was at Nikon in 2017. It was my second Nikon ever, and he was a guest of honor. The Fisherman had just won the Stoker, which is a fantastic novel if you guys haven't read it. Seriously, it's
greatest horror novel in like 40 years of horror. Like, it's just the greatest.
And even now, like, I can't even remember exactly what we said. Like, I ended up having dinner with him and Laird and Brian Kirk, and we were kind of just talking about, what are we working on right now? Talking shop. And I don't remember the details of what we talked about specifically, but I wasn't talked down to. I wasn't. I was spoken to as a peer and an equal. And coming from several years of publishing independently myself and being discarded, just kind of, we'll stick you over there in the far corner, and all the real authors are going to sit up front. That sort of thing. You get that attitude of, if you self-publish, then you're not a real author, which is total bullshit.
Say that to Adam Neville.
Exactly. It was validating, that conversation, and I try to pay that forward whenever possible. When I meet newer writers, I try to, hey, what are you working on? What, I try to impart advice when I can, when it's relevant. Sometimes when it's not relevant, just to make them laugh. But yeah, so when Langan, so first of all, I mean, it was a huge honor when Langan blurbed my first collection. His blurb is front and center on the cover of Ugly Little Things. But then when it came time to put this together, and I started thinking about who I wanted to do the introduction, like, Langan was the only choice. Like there has been no one else, I think, who has championed my short fiction more than John Langan has. And he was always talking about Ugly Little Things when he had a chance, and that meant the world to me. So he was the only choice. There was no one else who could write an introduction for this collection of stories. And so I emailed him and asked him, and he said yes. And then he took forever to write it.
Forever? No way. No, the hell you say. No, because it's not like Apple literally says that all the time, that he takes
it was worth the wait, and I'm grateful for, I'm grateful to be an author in this industry at the same time as him.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for his friendship. And yeah, I love you, John. Thank you for everything.
That's beautiful. I love that. That makes
Also, fuck you.
Oh wow!
You knew that was coming.
Yeah, I'm well, long-suffering wife. So he's I can't wait one day to get a blurb from John Langan.
It'll happen.
My life's goal. But yeah, when it's interesting, like when you have these opportunities to get the people who are like your heroes or like your mentors or the people that you really look up to look at your stuff and give you a blurb or give you, and write your introduction or your forward, like it's really crazy. Like when those things come in, and it's like you get overwhelmed, right? Like, you have a quote from Clay on the cover of Cold Black and Infinite, and getting a blurb from Clay for Vile Thing for me was like, oh God, I can't believe that. You know what I mean? Like I love Clay stuff, and then as these things come in, it's just so overwhelming at times. And
it's a weird feeling because you spend so much time in a vacuum creating this weird shit.
Yeah.
And doubting yourself every step of the way, and you send it out into the world. You never know how it's going to be received. Some people love it, some people pan it. And then you've got the people who are your peers who are in your eyes on not just another level, but levels beyond where you are in your career.
Yep.
And for them to take the time to not only read your work, but say something about it that is endearing. It's such a weird feeling.
Yeah.
It's so weird to kind of, you get to step outside of yourself for a minute and see what others think of your work. Because I don't know about you, but everything I write is shit. I hate everything I do. It's never good enough in my eyes, and so it's immensely validating to get those little blurbs back, and knowing that if they didn't like it, they wouldn't say anything about it.
Right. There's nothing ever feels done. That's how I always, that's how I look at it. Like nothing's ever done, even when it is. But fuck John Langan. Let's move on.
He's the author of The House of Fuck You.
Oh, we don't talk about that. So I have, like I said, 2 more questions. So if people have more questions in the chat, that'd be great. Now, I'm interested. I think about goals. Like I'm a guy who thinks longitudinally. I don't know. Fuck it. I'm a guy who thinks down the line, and
wasn't that easier to say?
Yeah, I'm trying to be smart. Master's degrees and all that. So
teacher.
Yeah. I'm always thinking like, what's the next thing? What's the project for next year? What am I doing in 2 years, 3 years where I'd like to be with my work or whatever. So now that this collection is out, Devil's Creek has been republished and it's beautiful, and it has additional material and it's beautifully designed, and on the inside everything's great. What's the goal for the rest of 2023, and what are we possibly looking at in 2024 that you can talk about, if you can talk about anything?
I mean, I can. It's just that it may be 2025. So I spent a good chunk of this year revising a novel that I finished last year, called The Sundowners Dance. And it exists in the same Southland universe, but it actually takes place in Pennsylvania in the Poconos region. Also occurs, and I have his permission, so I'm not worried about this, but it also exists in the same universe as Anthony Rapinoe's Moon Hill, Moon Hill, Pennsylvania.
That's cool.
Yeah. So those who don't know, Anthony Rapino is, one of my best friends, and he created this Pennsylvania town to kind of serve as a sandbox for all these weird stories. And I actually published his collection, Greetings from Moon Hill, which, if you've never read that, I urge you to do so. It's Twin Peaks meets the Twilight Zone, themed around Halloween. When Bradbury talked about October people, he was talking about Tony.
Big time.
Uh,
Big time.
So yeah, the Sundowner's Dance is what's next. I turned it in to my agent a few weeks ago, and I'm hoping that it passes muster, and we can move on to the submission phase. But assuming that it gets picked up by a large publisher, which is the hope and the goal, we're talking like 2 to 3 years down the line. I have 2 short pieces that just got published this year. One is in Never Wake, a dream anthology edited by Tim Meyer and Kenneth Kane, which is out right now from Crystal Lake Publishing. And then, Puppeteer of Samhain, which is an October Screams that just came out last week from Kangaskhan Publishing. Just had an acceptance that I can't talk about for an anthology for next year. And I also have another story I want to write before the end of the year for another open call. It's due in December. Beyond that, I am going to get back to work on the follow-up to Devil's Creek, titled Revelation Road. I was about a quarter of the way into it when I signed with Becky, and she told me to, fix this other manuscript first. So I did.
Nice.
And so that's kind of the plan. So basically, with rare exception, I'm taking a step back from short fiction to focus on that, unless somebody invites me to something and it's too good to pass up.
Awesome.
So that's for all the editors out there. If you'd like me to contribute to your anthology, please communicate that to me, because I'm on the spectrum and I don't always understand that shit, especially on social media.
I love it. Yes, put Todd in more things.
Hello, Mr. Edler.
Oh. We have a question from Jason. Where do you recommend a new reader of your work start reading? The newest sounds like a good place, but what do you prefer the most?
It depends on what you want. Like, if you like long novels to digest and kind of sink into and live with for a while, Devil's Creek, hands down. That's my most popular title. That's what everybody knows me for the most part. If you'd prefer shorter stuff, obviously Coal Black and Infinite is a great place to start. Like right now. I also have another collection that's out with Crystal Lake that came out a few years ago. And if you like shorter stuff, like, novella length, I have 2 novellas currently out there in the world. The Final Reconciliation, which is about a progressive metal band, ties in with The King in Yellow. Also a Southland story. And my novella Scanlines, which is my second most popular title. It's also the most heavy hitting, I think. Also a Southland story. It's a ghost story about some teenage kids who think they're downloading pornography off the internet in the late 90s and end up instead downloading the video of a man committing suicide, and how it haunts them in the weeks to come. It's about trauma. It's about depression. It's about suicide. Very heavy topics. So, all the trigger warnings there. And if you're feeling adventurous and want something that isn't 100% horror, but is a little bit of everything, check out my monochrome trilogy. That's where I started. Monochrome 1 and 2 were self-published. Actually, they're all self-published because the publisher they were with a year ago I pulled my books basically, and that publisher doesn't exist anymore. Thank God. So if you're feeling adventurous, you can go with the trilogy as well. Basically, what I'm saying, Jason, is just buy everything I've written.
Yeah. I don't know if I mentioned this to you. I used scan lines in one of my lectures the other night. Did I tell you this?
That sounds familiar. You might
Yeah,
have.
I did a lecture about sort of like early, not like cursed media, but images that had been floating around on the internet in the early 2000s on like file sharing sites and stuff like that. And of course, I mentioned scan lines, and I had I talked about the storyline and everything. And of course, it was a true crime lecture, so there's no bleed over between true crime people and horror people. It's like you're one or the other. It's weird.
Thank
But
you, Jason.
there you go. Yeah, just buy everything, man. It's all worth it. It's all good stuff. But yeah, I'm a scan lines guy. I'm a big scan lines guy. I love scan lines. I love Devil's Creek also, but I really loves me some scan lines.
Scan lines was that unexpected story. I didn't expect anyone to want to read it because of how dark it is. It was dark even for me. Kind of had to sit alone and have a long talk with myself after I was done writing it. And it ironic. I mean, I talk about this in the afterword for the book, but it started as a form of therapy because I wanted to write something more positive.
Well, that's good.
yeah. So, what can I say? I'm always a quart low. I can't help it.
Does anybody else have any other questions in the chat? I was going to ask you a question about when you think your next collection will be, but with 6 years between the last one and this one, probably 5 to 7 years, maybe. Again,
I mean, I've already got 3 stories for it. It's just a matter of having more.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I'll put out another collection when I have enough stories to make another collection.
Yeah. What do you think is the sweet spot number-wise? That's interesting. Because I know you and I have had this conversation sort of in the past, but I'm just curious.
So I considered splitting Cold Black and Infinite, but scrapped that pretty early on. I mean, I go by word count.
Yeah.
A good 95 to 105,000 words is a 350 page book, depending on the size.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good chunk of stories. I mean, they could be long stories. I mean, take I don't know if Josh is still here, but I mean, Josh's new one, Spin a Black Yarn, is 4 novellas. It's only 4 stories, but they're novellas.
Yeah.
So I'd like to do something like that maybe in the future, like grouping Final Rec and Scan Lines with something new, or 2 new novellas or something. And I forget who said it, but there's a popular sentiment that novellas are like the perfect form for a horror story. They're long enough that everything gets developed to a satisfying degree, but it doesn't outstay its welcome.
Sure.
And I tend to agree with that. I would, I wish I could write more novellas.
Your agent.
God.
Awesome. That's a good agent.
This is what happens.
That's
I open my mouth and then I have more work to do.
Good. Good. Yeah, I would agree with you that novellas are the sweet spot. Proctor knows. Jay has been saying that for years on Paper Cuts. He's been saying for years that he's just hardcore novella guy, which is pretty great. Actually, it's funny you mentioned the Mallerman Spin a Black Yarn. That's the first thing I read by him, and I loved it.
Ever?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I bought everything, but that's the first thing that I made time to read.
Not spin a black yarn. Black Mad Wheel is still my favorite. That was his second.
It's awesome. It's a very talented fella. So anybody else has any questions or observations in the chat? We got about a little over 10 minutes left, and we're just kind of vamping at this point. So I think like seeing Cold Black and Infinite come together, and I know obviously Cemetery Dance has been fabulous. Novella is like a 90-minute horror movie. That's a perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
Perfect way to put it.
But it's R-rated and doesn't suck.
It's lean and mean. It's lean and mean. How do you feel about the finished product? Obviously you're proud, but like, is there anything that you are really hoping people take away from Cold Black and Infinite that we haven't talked about yet?
Two things. I hope it demonstrates my range. I can write a number of different types of stories. I didn't start out writing horror. I started out writing literary fiction because that's what I was taught to do in college, even though I hated it. And also just appreciation for the language. Something that often gets mentioned is that my stories have a lyrical quality, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, but it's true. I like to play with description. I like to play with, alliteration. My editor, Amelia, swears that in another universe, I'm a poet, not a novelist. So yeah, the range and the language, I hope people, kind of appreciate that I'm not a one-trick pony, and it's not always going to be, small town horror.
Interesting.
Also, real quick, Red Lego. I don't know if this exists. This was a themed shirt I got off of like T-Villain or something years ago. I wish Baphomet Books was a real store. I would totally shop there.
Let's open it. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's start a business. Who cares?
Fuck it. It's only money.
Yeah. What does it matter? So I was going to say, when you were tooting your own horn, I was going to toot your horn for you a little bit.
Oh, please.
I think that there's, and I don't know, maybe you don't agree, but I think that there's a level of intimacy in your writing that really comes across. And I'm not just talking intimacy in terms of like the relationships between characters, but there's an intimacy between the narrative and the reader, and there's a closeness to it. And even, you had me read that one story that you have coming out soon, hopefully. And there was intimacy there. And that was a brutal, dark, ugly story. And yet there was still that connection between the reader and the narrative. There was no walls up. It's very welcoming. It's almost like a warm, bloody hug you're writing. And
thank you. I can see that. I like to get inside characters' heads. People who play video games will probably understand what I'm talking about here, but I like to go with the over-the-shoulder camera look, where you're with a particular character, you're kind of watching things, not necessarily through their eyes. You have that distance a little bit, but I'm sure there's a technical term for this. It's been a long time since school, folks, so bear with me. But basically you have that omniscience, but it's very focused on the character at the moment.
Third person close.
What?
Third person close.
Yeah. Thank you. I I love to get into a character's head. I like to understand what they're thinking, what their thoughts are. I try to provide some logic, or at least demonstrate the train of thought that leads them to act or say the things they say.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that comes from the ether. I mean, it's understanding how people talk to each other, understanding how people sometimes tight walk their relationships, with people, and just observing how people interact. And so, yeah, thank you. I don't know what else to say.
And that's another way I think we refill the bucket too,
Mhm.
because by honing that kind of ear for not even just ear for dialogue, but like ear for relationships and ear and eyes for relationships and how people interact, so we can better, approach stuff like that in our own work. And I think you do a nice job of that, obviously, and that again goes hand in hand with the intimacy thing.
Thank you.
But does anybody else have any other questions in the chat? Turned it to a German.
Last call, folks.
Yeah.
Anything you want to ask, hit me up.
Also,
I don't know if I said this, but hey, Jackie.
Way to go. I think about, how there's certain people, obviously you and I are close, and I'm always cheering for you and stuff, but there's always people that I'm like actively looking forward to more things from. And it's usually a few people here and there, but it's always you are on that list of people that I'm always looking forward to more things from. And I think, everybody here probably, certainly your agent, but other people as well still clearly want that. We all want more things from you, but of course it takes time. So if it takes 6 years again for another collection, I think people will be understanding. But, everybody here is excited. Everybody here wants the book. Everybody here has likely ordered the book. And I can't wait to see what happens with it.
Me too. It's been reaffirming to hear, to see the early reviews and the thoughts on it and everything. And, it's always nice to see those things, but at the same time, it's a relief, because then it means I did my job.
Yeah.
I understood the assignment.
Candace has a great question. Where are you appearing next?
Let's see. So next, I will be at. Let me pull up my website under appearances, where everybody can find all this information. Also, because I don't remember what the event is called. Okay, Halloween Scares at Barnes & Noble Arena Hub in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, from 12 to 4 on October 21st. So in about a month, I will be there alongside many other wonderful folks, including Kelly Owen, Amanda Headley, Sam Rebeline, whose book Edenville is amazing and it should be on your shopping list, Bob Ford, Tommy Clark, Anthony J. Rapino, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, he's going to come out of his cave.
What about Chuck?
Oh, yeah, C.W. Breyer. He'll be there.
Yeah. I'm sad that I won't be there.
I'm sad, too. And after that, my last event for the year, unless, some bookstore or library reaches out to me in the interim, my last major event for the year will be November 3rd and 4th for Halloween Hangover 2 in Richmond, Virginia at Barnes & Noble Libby Place, alongside Jesus. Not literally Jesus, but like Haley Piper, Brian Keene, Brian Asman, R.J. Joseph, Grace Reynolds, Daniel Krause, D. Alexander Ward, Cynthia Pelayo, Clay Chapman, Jessica McHugh, Laurel fucking Hightower, Max Booth III, and a lot of people. And Red Legault will also be there.
I bailed out of that one.
Oh, thanks, Jason. I appreciate that very much. I'm glad you've enjoyed the chat.
Wonderful.
Rob, I wish I could say the same.
Oh! I knew him.
It's a cool candle.
Thank you. It was made by Charlene Ellsby for me.
Nice. You know what Charlene Ellsby made for me?
I don't. You're gonna say something mean. What?
Not a goddamn thing.
Hey.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I also have Pink Mary here.
You're sniffing Pink Mary.
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good title, Sniffing Pink Mary. And then Rocket Pop Jesus.
Yeah, it's like that show that Ice-T is on. The like CSI or something where he's always talking about new drugs on the streets. Like, yeah, it's called Pink Mary. The kids on the street are always sniffing it. Get some euphoric.
I'm gonna go do some Pink Mary, and then hopefully that'll put me down for the count.
It totally did not look like a candle, by the way.
No, it's a penis.
I knew it.
Yeah. So, thank you for having me to host this.
Well, thank you for coming. I know it was short notice, but this has been fun, Rob. Thank you so much.
Good. I'm glad. I hope everybody enjoyed the chat, and I hope everybody pre-orders Todd's new, or not pre-orders, but oh my god, holy smokes!
God, have you been watching the whole time? Did you hear all that nice shit I said about you?
Wait, hang on, keep that up. I want to take a picture of it. Wait, I gotta be in the shot. That's crazy. Wow. What a time to be alive.
Right? Right.
But yeah, so, again, everybody pick up Cold Black and Infinite. Go and see Todd at all of these fabulous events that he has lined up. I thought we had something, Todd.
We do, John. We do. I love you dearly, my friend.
But yeah. Buy Todd's new collection and go and see him. Get him to sign it.
Yeah.
He's got a beautiful
and also, real quick, before we call this a night, the folks who pre-ordered the signed copies through my website, I apologize for the delay. I'm still waiting on the books to ship from the printer, and I will start sending those out as soon as I receive them and sign them. So please bear with me. If you're irate about it, shoot me an email and I'll send you the ebook free of charge. If you're still irate about it, I can't help you.
Send them my way. I'll fight your battle.
Fine. I'll send them to Becky. She'll deal with them.
Oh, thank God.
But yeah, Rob, where can people buy your stuff? Thank you for, this is the least I can do for you doing this.
You can buy my stuff on a very famous website that starts with an A and ends with a Mazan. You can get my stuff there. You can also find it at wherever books are sold. My newest one is The Vile Thing We Created, and October 27th, my collection, Wrapped in Plastic and Other Sweet Nothings, comes out. Thank you. Thank you. And I also found out that Curse of the Cobb Man might be coming out next month, also from Weird House Press.
Ooh.
So it'll be double dipping Ottone in October, baby.
I don't want to hear you say that ever again.
I'm having t-shirts made right now.
We're gonna double dipping the Ottone.
Oh yeah, baby.
Ugh. So yeah, Cold Black and Infinite is the book. It's out today. You can buy it wherever fine books are sold, or occult evil books are sold.
Yep.
Or where desperate authors' books are sold. Yeah, thank you all for coming, and more importantly, thank you all for reading and for your support. It means the world to me, and you're all awesome people, except for you. You know who you are. All right, folks. Thank you. Good night.